It's time for God Talk. I'm Father Z along with my good friend. I called him my cousin to get him up here today. So that's my cousin. And we're all related one way or another. Tony LaGuardia, or as I also call him, Tony Lombardi, the great football coach. It turns out that you really did coach football.
I did. My son, when he was in third and fourth grade.
Got the nice coaching jacket. Now, were you the head coach or a position coach?
No, I was called the in and out coach. What that meant is we had so many kids on the team that I was in charge of making sure kids got playing time.
Oh, good.
So I had to keep an eye on about, 30 kids, making sure each kid got in there and played a certain amount of time.
I used to coach challenger baseball for special needs kids, and I was perfect. I was like Walter Matthau, except I didn't drink. And, I'll have a beer like anybody else, but not at the ball field. All kids decided they all wanted to play first base. Okay, everybody play first base. Whatever. I had kids that would bunt, and they would run like they hit a homer. I'm like, fantastic.
Great job.
Good job on that home run. And I thought to myself, quite different than the participation trophy. If these kids believed that they were the first baseman, that they were, Lou Gehrig, or if they were Babe Ruth at the plate and their bunt was a home run, good for them.
So be it.
And so I would try to teach some of the, intricacies of baseball from time to time. But it's not really a big deal. And as you found out with coaching these little kids, I think a lot of times the parents try to live vicariously.
Absolutely.
And we start putting expectations on our children, and we don't let them enjoy being kids. And before you know it, they're not kids. And if you don't pay attention to them, they grow up to be miserable people, and they don't have any sort of guidance on how to deal with any sort of challenges that come their way. And so I think, it brings us a nice conversation point before we move further to just take time to smell the roses, enjoy. I mean, the playtime thing is important. All those kids deserve to play some football and have a good time. And gosh, it's really cute, especially when they're 6 or 7 and they're in these these
uniforms are way over.
They're too big for them. And they all go for the ball. They all dive. It's just fun to watch.
Fun. Great memory.
Yeah, it's great stuff. So anytime that you can get involved in the community on that level, it's always a good thing. So what did you want to start off today? You got this book that you got me a copy of, which I think is tremendous.
This is yours.
And I will say that if I was going to be somebody's spiritual advisor, that book, Jesus Calling, is a really good one because it gives you something to do every day, something to contemplate, and then it gives you the scripture readings. So over the course of a year, you're probably going to go through the whole Bible, I would imagine. And it's useful and in small chunks so that you can actually apply it to your life. So this is good. You got one that you're going to share with us this morning.
Yeah, I want to read one to start off our podcast because, and then once I'm done reading it, I will get into why I chose this one today and how it pertains to life in general. But here it goes. You can live as close to me as you choose. I set up no barriers between us. Neither do I tear down barriers that you erect. People tend to think their circumstances determine the quality of their lives. So they pour their energy into trying to control those situations. They feel happy when things are going well and sad or frustrated when things don't turn out as they'd hoped. They rarely question their correlation between their circumstances and feelings. Yet it is possible to be content in any and every situation. Put more energy into trusting me and enjoying my presence. Don't let your Don't let your well-being depend on your circumstances. Instead, connect your joy to my precious promises. Now,
it's easy to be a Christian when things are going your way.
Absolutely.
When you can pay all your bills, when you have a great job that you like, when your dreams come true. Quite another thing to live your life as a Christian when things aren't seemingly going your way.
Okay.
With that in mind, this past Sunday was the reading of The Rich Man and Lazarus. And you'll notice that in that particular scripture, which is from the Gospel of Luke, we don't know the name of the rich man because he's been blotted out of the book of the living, right? His name is not on the register in heaven. He's no longer in the book of the living. He's with the dead. He lived a life that was so selfish that he doomed himself. And much like the readings, many of these obstacles we put up on our own. So these are little things, little takeaways that Coach Tony has given us this morning. I've elevated you to Coach.
Great.
Spiritual Coach Tony.
Sounds good.
What were you going to mention about?
Okay. I recently was in contact with a very, very close friend who we would communicate very often, like, a couple of times a month, whether it was a text message or a phone call. And I found out that they're going through a very, very difficult time personally, and their family has some very pressing issues health-wise and career-wise. And I wanted to bring that up, and I wanted to read that excerpt from the book because what I experienced and what I want to explain to everyone, and hopefully it gets through, is that life is about seasons. And the reason I bring up the word seasons is because actually driving in here this morning, where we went from summer, now we're into fall and winter's ahead and the leaves are coming off the trees. And each day changes. Each season changes. You have good seasons in life and you have tough seasons in life.
Or you have New York Giant football seasons or New York Jet football
which
seasons.
Are always kind of,
yeah.
Let's not even go there.
Right.
But anyway, the thing about this person I'm talking about going through a very difficult time, and what I experienced by Christine's side is this, and this is so important for me to bring out, is that no matter what the season, whether it was a good season, a bad season, or an okay season, Christine showed me that through those seasons, each day, through the good or bad season, she found joy. Her faith was something that, again, through these podcasts I've mentioned many times, that I learned from, and I know others have learned from. So the message that I want to relay is that whether it's a good season or bad, try to find some joy in your day, because there will be. Even though it's a tough day, you will find some joy, but it's your choice.
Sometimes you find joy in the weirdest situations.
Absolutely.
I remember, I don't know why, but it was like last winter. Maybe it was just around spring. I don't know specifically the dates. But I had to go over to the hospital to have some blood tests on Saturday morning at 6:30 a.m. when they first opened. I was thrilled that I was able to go there on a Saturday morning, get my blood work done, and then go have some coffee and then go on with the rest of my day after fasting all night, right?
Yes.
Like you're supposed to. I was thrilled about that. I thought, isn't it a great country where you can actually go and get your blood work done? Now, I still haven't been paid for it. I still owe them the money because the whole insurance thing. But I was thinking, wow, this is great. And within no time at all, within 48 hours, I have this app. It tells me what my blood work is. I don't know what happened to me along the way. Like I pay attention to football stats and baseball stats. I started taking care of and noticing my blood stats. Right,
Okay.
whatever. It's crazy, right? And put it almost like I'm in a competition with myself. Let's see how low I can get my cholesterol to healthy levels. Let's see what those triglycerides are at now.
Competition.
Yeah, and even the weight loss. Ever since I started the one company, Big Fat American, I've lost more weight than ever. So I'm no longer really a big fat American.
Okay.
Then but fat in other ways. So you can actually find enjoyment out of that, even something simple as a blood test. And when the news is good, you sort of have a, wow, I'm glad that I'm healthy. You start to really understand what's important.
Right.
And there's a little bit of a warning for people. Sometimes you think that you have some sort of very serious disease. For a long time, I've ran into a lot of people because of decisions and choices that they made, thought that they had HIV. So they come in, get the HIV test, and you could see the fear in their eyes, very upset about the possibility of having that. They take the test. Meanwhile, before the results come back, now I think is rapid tests, so they can find out right away. which is good and bad, but they make deals with God. I'm going to change my ways. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it's almost like there's this aura of humility and this reaching out to God. And as soon as they get word that it's negative, quickly thereafter, they forgot about the fear and the deals that they made and how they wanted to change their lives. And they go back to the way they were before, thinking that, well, I got through it that time. And then maybe they repeat some of the bad behaviors. Maybe there's no change as a result. So there's that part of it. I see the same thing when people, before and after they go to confession, right? Whether you're Orthodox, Catholic, and I think, believe it or not, the Lutheran Church as well as Anglicans and Episcopalians do have their form of confession. And people go, well, why? God can convince, I don't need some priest to tell me I'm absolved. Well, actually, if you're going to go by Scripture, Jesus does give the authority of the apostles and the successors, the authority to remit sins.
Okay.
Right? It's the end of the Bible. So, all right. Be that as it may, it's also good for your soul. It's medicine for your soul. It can help you. It saves you $35 or more for the copay that you would tell all of these things to a psychologist who, by the way, will probably not keep your information as confidentially as a priest would. So just think about that. Yeah, look, I'm very forgetful, and as soon as someone tells me their confession, not too long thereafter, I forgot what they talked about. Unless they come to me on a regular basis, and it's a specific problem that they're trying to work through, then, I have the permission to bring it up. I'll ask, can we talk about this particular issue? If they say no, it's no. If they say yes, it's yes. But usually it's a spiritual condition that we're trying to work out over time. Because some things you don't go from Paul to Saul. It takes a while to work these out.
I have a question for you, and this pertains to you being a priest. What we're talking about the good seasons, the bad seasons, and trying to find joy. How often do you run across people who really understand and have the faith to do what I'm talking about, to understand that? Now, you talked a minute ago about someone, say, getting an HIV test and up to the result, they're nervous, they're, very on edge.
Making the deals with God.
Right.
I'm never going to do that.
But the question I have for you, and this I want our listeners to really to think about for a minute, because we're all, I guess, guilty of it. I guess I'll use the word guilty of it, where you're waiting for that good news, and thank God you do get good news, and you feel like, that's a weight off my shoulder. But here's the flip side of it. What about when you don't get good news and you're still able to have joy? How often do you see that, Father?
Well, it's not often. However, I think over time, even when you get bad news, people have a way of developing and I guess putting it in perspective. I do have a ministry that deals with people with HIV. And it's kind of interesting when I see the transition from newly diagnosed to understanding that they can survive it now and they can live many years. They have to make some changes. There's some, look, it's not easy. I could tell you that a lot of people get disowned by their families and they lose their home and they would end up homeless if not for a few programs that are available.
Wow. And
we try to give them the resources. You still have to do the work. But I think after a while, you sort of put things in perspective. You understand what you have to work with. And now with the medications, you can have actually a zero viral load.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost, what they'll tell you, it's undetectable. Now, there's a danger with that. I was watching a parade, and one of the actors on the parade's like, I've been taking my medicines, and now I'm undetectable. And I almost got the feeling like, I don't want to make this podcast about, how sex works or anything like that, but almost as if you no longer have to worry about precautions.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just say that the medication, and we have to put this because we're bringing it up, and bad news and stuff like that, and how people deal with it. So they take the medications, they start feeling better about who they are. Maybe their life is a lot better than what it used to be through the help of others around them. And then they can probably, if they're not careful, go back into those old destructive habits that put them there in the first place. Now, not being judgmental of anybody's orientation here, whether you're heterosexual or homosexual, as Christians, we're supposed to be celibate unless we're married. So that's number one. Number two, if you lack control on any level, whether it's eating or your sexuality or your drinking, you're going to get in trouble. Number three, even if you're undetectable, and let's just say for the sake of the argument, you can't give this disease that you've acquired to other people, you are also susceptible to gonorrhea and syphilis and the other STDs that are out there, which, by the way, as they progress and mutate, are getting worse, and almost they're becoming to the point where they're untreatable. So the lesson to be learned is you have to take every day. You can't take any day for granted. That's number one. Number two, try to be as happy as you can be, even through disappointment. And number three, and I think this is really crucial to all of us, is taking the time each day to pray to God, to develop that relationship. And if there's things that are holding you back from growing spiritually, then you have to deal with them. But above and beyond that, start taking the time to read Scripture, especially zone in on the Beatitudes. Because there's one beatitude, the meek shall inherit the earth. And that is really hard to understand, because if I was to ask you, what do you think, and I'll just do this for this discussion. Tony, what is your definition of meek?
That's a good question. I would say meek would be not having a personality, a strong personality where you're opinionated all the time.
That's one way. Yeah.
And having, let's see, how could I put this? Not having a lot of authority over other people. Maybe yourself.
Yeah, let's look at the definition here. Okay, and I'm gonna just go meek and see what it is. Quiet, gentle, and easily imposed on, submissive. Okay, meek. Meek shall inherit the earth. Now, let me give you an example of what finally taught. I learned yesterday what meek is all about. Mm-hmm. I've heard be meek, be meek, be meek. I don't know what that means. I see the definition, but how do you do that? And you got to rely on the wisdom of God to really get you through that. And this idea of turning the other cheek, we've heard that. Forgive, as you forgive, you'll be forgiven. All right. So this whole idea of meekness, I didn't learn till yesterday, till I met this 12-year-old boy who's blind, and his mom. And I'm not going to mention any names because I just don't want to say anything. Maybe we'll have him on in the future, which I think will be great. So I was having a horrible day. A work-related day, like all of us. Some of us, believe it or not, work is not always fun, right? Sometimes you don't go to work it's challenging. You have to deal with all kinds of different people. Not everybody believes the same things that you do. I was not having a good day. Just did not want to be here. And then I was walking around, and I ran into this mother and this little boy who's blind. And I had a conversation. What are you doing? Started out easy. And I was told that they're going to the news station to do an interview about these tags that the mom has made so that people with that are blind or have poor vision can read the Braille, and it'll tell them how to put the clothes on. Hey, wow. Things we take for granted. Left shoe, right shoe, front, back, inside, outside, right? Then you got, I don't even know how. I know blind people that for some reason I've always marveled at how they know what colors to put on so they don't clash. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at the hard time I have, and I have sight. All right. So I bring this kid around. I grab him by the hand. There's something about this little boy. You just wanted to just give him all kinds of hugs and kisses, right? He's so adorable. But adorable in a much different way, spiritual way. So I grab him by the hand, and then I bring him around to meet some of the guys here. And he goes into the studio. He meets one of the on-air personalities. Everybody's heart is melting. Mm. This boy has a great attitude. He can't see. I don't know about you, but I pretty much would be annoyed if I couldn't see. Being deaf is not a big deal. I think I could handle being deaf. But not being able to see, can you imagine being robbed of your sight? That's got to be one of the worst things. And then we always see these stories in the Bible about people's sight being restored. He restores sight to the blind. Now, I do have a person that I work with who's blind. I've known him for a long time, and whenever I make those readings and he gives sight to the blind, I look over at him to see the expression on his face because he's still waiting to see. But maybe he sees differently. So this little boy captivates this one guy, gets invited back to do a show next week on November 11th.
Wow.
And then I bring him over to meet Bart Scott, former linebacker of the New York Jets. Didn't know Bart was into wrestling. This little boy is into wrestling. And so Bart takes his title, the belt, puts it around the little boy. And the little boy's unassuming. He's mild. He's meek. And I've noticed that everybody's reaction is he's inheriting the world around him by just being who he is.
Great.
This happy, lovable, meek human being.
Yes.
And the next thing you know, Bart's giving him a gigantic WWE ring, and he's feeling a W on it. He can't believe, like, all the people that he's meeting. And then he's describing this move that he's heard about in wrestling. But he probably, obviously, would not know what that looks like.
Wow.
What are they talking about? So Bart picks him up over his shoulder and goes, here's how the move goes. Puts him over the shoulder and then gently lays him on the table so that he can get the idea of the feeling of being over the shoulder, what the guy is doing while he's wrestling, and bam, putting him on the mat. So this is the first experience that this little boy has ever had trying to understand what he hears about. And it was done in a very loving way by a big, gigantic linebacker who used to talk smack.
Right. A lot of it.
Right, a lot of it. That's why he got that belt, because they were so impressed by his ability to talk smack. Where'd you learn it? From watching wrestling. That's where Bart got it. So this little boy. Then we're downstairs, and there's one woman who is the daughter of a pastor who sings beautiful gospel music. And I said, well, you know that this boy can sing. He sings Ben by Michael Jackson.
Wow.
Ben, It turns out to be the song that my daughter always listens to each and every night because it's a story about a relationship with a boy and a little rat.
Yes, that's right.
Weird, right?
Yeah.
And of all the songs he sings that, there's not a dry eye around a big man, 6'8" and stuff like that. So this little meek little boy, out in the foyer where you go get your security information so everybody can hear it. They're all looking in a direction. And his boy is like just singing like, it's almost like the meek shall inherit the earth because he just shows up. He is who he is. He's happy even though it's not a good situation. This is not a good situation to
It's a gift.
Be blind.
He's got a gift.
Oh, he's got gifts. What we don't see, he sees.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing with little Matthew, little Father Stephen's son who's got Down syndrome, goes into the church and has a relationship with these icons as if the Mother Mary is having a direct conversation with him. There was a miracle with his sight because he was born blind.
Wow.
And as a result of his interaction with the icon, the Mother of God, holding the baby Jesus, it's a Mer-streaming icon from Hawaii that was originally from Montreal, a long story. He regains his sight. Recently, another man regained his sight as a miracle. So miracles do happen. Mm-hmm. But who do they happen to? I think that there was always this relationship between God and the people that are seeking. I mean, we see this all the time in the Bible. So, what you asked was a very interesting question of how you can be happy with all things. I think if you build your relationship with God, you'll attain that, but it takes patience. Because back to the story about the rich man and Lazarus. Lazarus, he suffered his entire mortal life. And the very last line of that gospel story, in patience. Mm. So in an effort to be happy, we have to learn patience. We have to trust in God. We have to really, if you believe that God can do all things, then you got to believe it. And God knows what you need before you ask. But also at the same time, he's not going to give you things that are bad for you if you have a good relationship with God. He might allow you to accomplish it on your own outside of his will,
Well,
but then you're going to pay the price for that. Those
well,
are the consequences.
Memories came back to me this morning driving over here because, it's a cool brisk morning driving across the George Washington Bridge to get here. And as many of our listeners know, including yourself, Father Rich, that for many years, Chris and I drove across that bridge going to Memorial Sloan Kettering for her chemo, for her surgeries. And I will tell you that the countless times we drove across that bridge, and again, this memory came back to me today driving over it, no matter if it was a snowstorm or a sunny day, going for chemo or surgery or getting good news or bad, the faith that Christine had in God, there was always joy on her face, no matter what. And I would get that. I would take that and try to use it in my own life, being her partner, being her husband. And I'm trying to get that point across in some of these podcasts and all of these podcasts.
Well, I think you are.
And also by the reading that I read a few moments ago, because that is such a gift. And if you can just bring part of that, not that all of us have that inner strength to do that or that faith, but if you could try, it will change your life for the better, even if it's just for the moment or for the day. And that's a start.
Mm-hmm.
So that's important.
And what I find really interesting is when you talk about those trips that you took over the GWB back and forth and going to chemo, you have this, like, your face lights up. Like,
no doubt about it.
Almost as if, gee, I wish I can relive those horrible times all over again.
That's for sure.
Because they were great in certain ways.
Because I was with her and I experienced it.
Yeah.
And not everyone can apply that to their lives.
Right. Well, here's the other part of this whole walk with Christ, the Christian way, is it involves suffering. It involves picking up your cross. See, when you read these stories, every time he talked about picking up your cross and following me, he lost more people. Mm-hmm. Like, that's crazy talk. Because in their day, he was talking figuratively in many situations and using parables, but they took that serious. And in certain levels, you had to pick up that cross. You had to be willing to die with Christ, right? But nobody wanted part of that. Nobody wants the cross to bear. We're all, even to this day and age, we have to pick up our cross and bear it. Now, what is our cross? Sometimes our cross is little things like not having a foul mouth. Now, I've dropped my series of F-bombs every now and then out of frustration. Who doesn't? It's part of our linguistics. It's how we express ourselves. It's how you treat your enemies. Or how about this one? We're supposed to pray for our president. It doesn't say pray for a president that's of a certain party or a certain political disposition. You pray for your president.
Gotcha.
We're not supposed to hate anybody. So hating anybody, no matter who they are, is definitely a no-no. We're supposed to really champion those who can't fight for themselves. We're supposed to worry about the poor. You don't want to be that rich guy in that gospel story. It's not easy. When you're at work and the guys are talking about the girls in not so wholesome ways, it's one thing to say, boy, she is really attractive. I'd like to go out with that girl. If you're single, of course, right? Yeah, I agree, man. She's really something else. Is she a nice girl? Those are the conversations. Right. Instead of
respectful.
How about this? What's the quality you want out of your mate? Oh, she's got to have a nice figure. No, your first quality should be, is she godly or not? That's what you should go for. We've been taught everything else through nefarious means.
Society.
Right. So, what are the qualities you're paying attention? How are you bearing your cross? When you know that you don't need two coats, give one away. Like with Christine's clothes, she wasn't using them anymore.
Right.
You're going to keep them in the closet?
Exactly.
For what? Give them to people who needs it.
That's
what I would expect.
That's what
people to do.
So I know that's exactly what is the right thing to do. Not only the right thing, but also that makes her happy.
Yeah. Be kind to your boss.
Yeah.
I mean, these people are hard to be kind to. They're not kind to you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's face it. The Pharisees and Sadducees were not kind to Jesus. Pontius Pilate ordered his death. He didn't really have a problem with Pontius Pilate because if my kingdom was of this world, you'd be a goner. No power. And the way he said no power is given to you unless it's been given to you by, somebody above in the language. Pilate thought that he was talking about, oh, you mean Caesar Augustus or whoever the Caesar was at the time? It's like, oh, okay. When they go, here's a coin, he goes, should we pay our taxes to Caesar? He goes, well, give me a coin. What's on that coin? Give to Caesar what is Caesar, and God said, what is God? They always tried to trip him up with that. So Jesus is telling us what our attitude is supposed to be. And there's so many unhappy people because they're fighting on Facebook over stupid stuff, right? We are talking about, and I never get into politics, but if you're really into politics and you really care about our country, I think you really got to shift on how you think and how you feel about the people that are voted in. Now, nobody's perfect getting in there. I'm sure if you dug up information on any one of us, none of us would get into heaven.
They lead the country, right, so
none of us would.
American.
None of us are qualified to do that. There's not a single person on this planet that has a perfect background that would be a good president, vice president, senator, congressman. Everybody does bad things.
Absolutely.
So stop it. Stop. And the biggest thing, I think, which makes people unhappy and unsure of themselves, when you live your life as a hypocrite.
Yes.
Treat people like you want to be treated.
Absolutely.
So then, we come back to how do you live a joyful life? It's the golden rule. Treat people how you want to be treated. Love your neighbor. What does that mean? Have concern for your neighbor. If you're rich, share. You're not going to take all. That's not going in the ground with you.
Right.
Okay. Again, you don't want to be that guy, the rich man in the Lazarus story. If you see suffering, do something. It's not somebody else's job. You took steps you were suffering, the loss of your wife that you loved more than anything in this whole wide world, and you're using this, what God would do, he uses the bad for the good. The bad can be used for good. This was not good what happened.
No.
This is not what somebody wants. I was thinking about my mother the other day. I was thinking about the time I found her baptismal record at St. Peter's and Paul's in Passaic, the church that you've been to. Beautiful church, right?
Absolutely.
You went inside there.
Yep.
In a neighborhood that really needs help. So we're working on that. But here's the thing. I thought about when I saw my mom's signature, I started to break down and cry because I don't think when the name was written in that book by the priest and she was baptized, a cute little baby, I can just imagine, I don't think she ever thought that she wouldn't make it past 60 and that she'd be murdered.
Right.
I don't think she thought that she would end up getting married and things would be so financially tough that we were lucky to have anything for food for Christmas or that we had to rely on donations or the kindness of others to get through it. I don't think that I remember when she bought her own Toyota, she bought it from a dealership. It was used. She was very proud because she did it herself.
Right.
She worked she had her own job. She was on her way home and the tire fell off. So they had to send a tow truck out and put that tire back on. I don't know about you, but if I bought a car and the tire fell off from any dealer, I'd be like, you're taking this car back and you're going to give me another car because I know what's going to happen to the front end and the frame and all that stuff. And they're not going to replace it. So can you imagine, right? I was there when, we were in this old Dodge and my dad somebody gave him the car. I don't know how he got it. And a drunk guy being towed, by a chain in a burnt car with the door open, slammed us in the back of the car. Gas is pouring out. This is when I was like 4 or 5. My mom was shocked in the front seat. They had to take her out. The ambulance comes. We all go. She didn't know that day that the one car that they got for nothing was going to, disappear, like that fast.
Right.
And I saw the drunk man passed out behind the wheel, lying on the barrel. There wasn't even a seat. It was the weirdest thing to see. It caused so much trauma that the man who ran the cleaners across the street died of a heart attack soon after for witnessing that.
Oh, my gosh.
So, I saw the signature, and as I saw the signature, her life flashed before my eyes.
Her whole life.
The whole life. And, in many ways, such a disappointing. I know that there was all these disappointments that happened to her, but I'm going to tell you, if you're listening, I never knew it. Somehow, some way, my mom seemed happy, and I don't know how. I mean, I guess it's a relationship with God, but you know what?
And making that choice,
right,
though.
Right, okay. She didn't like some of the things that happened to her and the people that put her in that position. You know, I get all of that, but, you know, she was happy. And the reason why I'm sharing is because something that we can all relate to. The loss of your life, the loss of my mother, two separate things, horrible conditions, each one. You think about the life of the person. This is who you grew up with, and it's not normal. Like when you die from cancer at a young age, it's not normal. It's not what you expect. One of the Psalms, Psalm 90, Psalm 89 in the Septuagint, which is a one verse off, basically, one chapter off. It says, our time is 70 years. 80 if you're healthy, but toil and travail will follow you all the days of your life. So when you leave this planet before that time, it's, you know, it's something that can happen to any of us. So here we are again with some examples of people that didn't plan on what happened to them. My mom being murdered right in front of me. Now, you know, there's this whole thing, well, how do you feel about the guy who murdered her? I don't hate the guy. Did I forgive him? I guess, but he never asked for forgiveness. So the way you forgive is how you're going to be forgiving. So I think that you got to ask too. You know, you can't, like, I probably guess I don't hate him, right? Kind of forgive him for he knows not what he does. I feel bad for his family, his daughters, okay? Imagine your name is attached to a serial murderer. I'd change that last name. What if your last name was Hitler?
Right,
like,
sure.
You know, come on. So, you know, these are the complexities of life that we encounter. We don't have any. When you got married to Christine, you never thought she'd get appendiceal cancer.
Never thought.
I mean, well, there's in the back of our mind, like all the fame, all the regular breast cancer possibility, ovarian cancer. Right. I mean, you name it. I mean, exactly. We have the common ones that we get.
That you hear
but
about.
I'll never forget when I before I even mentioned, I'm like, appendiceal. What the?
Extremely rare.
I had to look it up. So these things happen to us, and then I guess along the way, this is where, in some instances, our faith gets tested. In some instances, we got to learn what our priorities are, and we got to focus on being happier individuals.
Well, that's it too. I mean, when you don't bring joy into each day. Now, I'm not speaking from experience either. I have very rough days a lot of the times, but what I'm making examples of is the way Christine lived, where you can go through each day, no matter how good or bad things are, and find joy in it and be happy. That's a full life.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what's called a full life.
And
because you don't know what we're talking about right now is you don't know what's going to happen. Forget about tomorrow. You don't even know what's going to happen today.
That's exactly the point.
So by going through life worrying and fearful and not living a life of faith, well, you're cheating yourself.
Yeah, you really are. You're not living life to the fullest.
Absolutely.
That's what living life to the fullest means.
Absolutely.
It does not mean that you do whatever you want.
Right. Oh,
and
absolutely.
don't think what it means is, basically, I'll tell you the brass tacks, be ready to go.
Yeah.
You have no idea.
And enjoy the ride while you're on it.
On September 11th, 2001, at roughly 9 o'clock in the morning.
That's it.
People showed up at their job. You know, maybe they had the night before the Giants lost to the Broncos, right? I bet you a lot of unhappy Giant fans that day. Just like, you think that's something to worry about? Right. No. These people went to work. They had no expectation what would happen, and they never came home. Right. So, you know, and then we hear the stories of heroism.
Yes.
That was part of that. Yes. So there was some good that came out of it, but the reason why Tony and I are telling you this is because you just don't know how much time you've got left. Make the most of it. And when we say make the most of it, you have to have a relationship with your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. You have to have your relationship with God. You have to give your heart over to God. You have to, if you're a Christian, live the life of a Christian. What does that mean? Well, we just went and spoke about 30 to 40 minutes about this. Yes. Be meek, be mild, be forgiving, don't hold grudges, try not to hate people. People are going to aggravate you. Pray for your enemies. Treat people like you want to be treated. Spend a little time each day reading Scripture, Make sure that you have a prayer life. And if there's anything that you want us to cover on this podcast, by all means, you can always follow us at facebook.com/BigFatAmerican and make a comment on the page regarding God Talk. Twitter at Zach Martin Rocks. Or you can email me at ZachMartinRocks.com.